Hey guys, my name is Trevor Sullivan and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I realize it's been a while since I created any videos on here, but I've been really busy working over at CBT Nuggets right up here on my hat, and I've been creating a lot of awesome training content. But in today's video, I wanted to talk about one of the software tools that I have come across, one of the probably hundreds, if not thousands, of software tools that I've come across in my research as I've been learning and building out more training content around a wide variety of topics. Now, if you'd like to support the work that I do here on my YouTube channel as well as professionally, you can actually head out to CBT Nuggets and sign up for an account. And it's about 60 bucks a month approximately, and you can sign up and see a bunch of different courses that I've created. Most of my recent training content over the last, 6, 7, 8 months probably out of this year in 2022 has been predominantly centered around Kubernetes. So I've got several different training courses here as a Certified Kubernetes Administrator, CKA. So if you're interested in administering Kubernetes clusters, deploying Kubernetes clusters, managing some of the internals, there's a whole bunch of skills here. I'm not sure exactly how many hours. It looks like it's about 16 hours on the CKA course. We've also got a Certified Kubernetes Application Developer training course that covers a whole bunch of topics that you're going to need to know as an app developer. This consists of 45 hours worth of training alone. So a whole bunch of concepts in here, some really advanced concepts that you'll need to know about, building serverless applications with Knative serving, applying network policies, routing traffic, using ingress, DNS configuration, TLS configuration, and all that kind of stuff. So lots of valuable information in this course as well. And then the most recent release that I have is actually the Certified Kubernetes Security course, or CKS. So if you go out, get these certifications, deep dive into Kubernetes, there's tons of knowledge inside of these courses that I've been working on really hard over the last year approximately. CKS is about 26 hours worth of training. This skill that I've got right in front of me here on this video is actually talking about an open source project called Kyverno. But there's tons of useful information here in the CKS course as well. So I would encourage you, if you want to support my work, to sign up for this. Anyways, enough for the shameless self-promotion here, but it costs money to create this kind of training content, and so I would love it if you guys would be interested in supporting my work. With that being said, the tool that I wanted to talk about today is something that I haven't really used a whole lot in my training, but it's a tool that I've come across. It's very beautiful. It's really professionally done, and it's really simple and straightforward to use. So that ease of use, the fact that they provide a free tier is really cool. This is not a promotion or anything like that. I don't have any relationship with anybody at this company that develops this software, but it is just a really handy piece of software that I came across. So this is Termius, and it works as an SSH client so that you can manage things like Linux servers, or if you've got Windows servers that you've installed SSH daemons on, you can manage those with Termius as well. One of the ways that I actually came across Termius was because I was looking for an SSH client that I could run on my Android device. I use a Google Pixel 6 Pro. Awesome device, really high performance and everything. But I really love this device, and there's actually a version of Termius here. I know you probably can't really see that very well, but I'll bring it up here on my screen in a few minutes. And this is just a beautiful SSH client, and the reason I actually came across it was because I was searching for an SFTP GUI. So I was looking for something that I could use to just graphically transfer files between my host system and my remote Linux systems. So this is a really sweet utility to do SSH management of remote shells, and you can also set up port forwarding rules. You can do SFTP, and there's just a whole bunch of awesome features in here. So I kind of wanted to talk you through it, show you how you can use it. I believe it's cross-platform, but I am using it on the Windows system here. They do have a free tier here for hobbyists. You can install it on a single system for free, but if you want to be able to synchronize your session configurations and unlock some more advanced features, I know that there's some features in here that are kind of locked down, like setting environment variables, for example, and there's a couple other features that I can't remember that are kind of locked down, but it does give you kind of a free tier to play around with, which is really nice. But anyways, on the Windows platform, you can actually install this really easily by using the Scoop Package Manager. So you can grab the Scoop Package Manager over at scoop.sh. This is a really great way for software developers and DevOps professionals and really anybody who's doing any kind of coding work to install software packages onto their system. So Termius is really easy to install with the scoop package manager. And so you can just do a scoop install on the Termius package here. It's under the extras bucket. So you do have to add in that extras bucket right after you install scoop, but that's pretty easy to do. You just have to install Git as a dependency. And then there's a scoop bucket add command where you can add the extras bucket and import that metadata so that you can access other packages. So once you've got Termius installed, you can just fire it up. Let me just go ahead and launch it here on my other screen and bring it over here. But Termius is just a really beautiful interface here. The design is just really professionally done. It's got nice animations when you click on different things here, just nice graphical animations. Unfortunately, the entire graphical interface doesn't seem to scale like Visual Studio Code does. I'm not sure why that is, but you can use Control+ and Control- to alter your text size once you've established a shell. So I am going to go ahead and actually launch a virtual machine instance here. So let's just launch a Linode instance here to play around with. I'm going to use an Ubuntu Linux virtual machine here. Let's stick it in the Dallas region. I'll do let's say a single CPU, 2 gigs of RAM, and I'll just call it, the name's fine. And then I'll just give it a root password about Trevor123, exclamation point. And then down here, we'll just do a create Linode. All right, so that'll take just a second to spin up. It's pretty fast. But let's talk about some of the options that are available when you are using Termius here. So once that machine becomes available, we'll go ahead and connect to it with Termius. But right up here, you can add hosts. You can also group hosts together. They also provide this really handy option to import from other applications. So if you're a Windows user and you're using PuTTY, you can import session configurations from there. If you're using other utilities like WinSCP, for example, you can import from there. There's even a CSV option here. You can import from AWS and DigitalOcean. So a lot of convenient options there. And there's also integration here. Anytime that you see this little up arrow, I know that's probably pretty small, but unfortunately I can't really zoom in unless I use a third-party utility, which I don't really feel like doing right now. But this little up arrow, anytime you see that in the user interface in Termius, that's just a paid option. So you'd have to pay to unlock the AWS integration as well as the DigitalOcean integration. It'd be great to see integration with other cloud providers, but I mean, it's not really a huge deal to just come in here and add some hosts. So if I just add in like a new host group right here, I could just call it maybe like Linode or, cloud hosts or something like that. And what is enabling this to? I can't quite remember. Oh, these are the SSH configuration options. So I could go ahead and say what my username and password are. I could go ahead and plug in my username and password here for that entire group. And then inside of this group, I can go ahead and add a standalone host here. And so that's where I would plug in the public IPv4 address to one of my hosts. So I'll go ahead and just specify that. And you can also see some of the other paid options down here, like SSH agent forwarding, if you want to import your keys locally and then just use those to forward to Termius. Also startup snippets, so you can launch a startup snippet when you launch a connection to a host, do some pre-setup work for your shell. You can also set up proxying. You can do host chaining, which kind of lets you jump through multiple hosts to kind of hide your connection between different nodes. So a whole bunch of different options there. You can also apply a label here. So I'll just call this Linode host 01 or something like that. But we could also add in more hosts to this same group here. So it's kind of up to you how you want to organize things here, but it does have that option. Now, another paid option that you have here is the ability to establish serial connections. So it does support serial connections, but that's not enabled in the free version. There's also Face ID and Touch ID, FIDO2 key support for authentication. There's automations here that actually allows you to synchronize terminal input. This is actually a really powerful feature that's available in another open source terminal. I can't remember if it's Tabby or a different open source terminal, but it allows you to synchronize input. So you could have like 4 or 5 or 6 different shells that are going to different hosts, and you can actually input your keyboard input across all of those hosts at the same time. So that's what this automation feature does in the Termius shell, but I don't have a paid account, so I can't use that feature. We do have SFTP right over here as well. So I can, transfer files from my local system over to the remote host here. So if I do select host, I can say, all right, I want to connect to this host right here. It'll just ask me to confirm my host key fingerprint, just say add and continue. And maybe we can create some data in my local system here. I'll just generate some data with PowerShell, say like 1 to 50, and we'll just say set content dash path, content dash path, and then we'll just say new GUID.GUID.txt, and I'll wrap that because I think I need to in a subshell, and then I'll say value XYZ. So that should just create a bunch of files here. Let's try that with double quotes here and see if that works. And yeah, that seems to work okay. All right, so we generate a bunch of files here in PowerShell, and then if we want to play around with transferring files between our local system and our remote system, we can just drag and drop right over here and just transfer these files. We could also do a control click to select multiple files and then drag all of those over here. Just do a replace operation here, so we can upload multiple files at the same time. So if you need to access data on a remote server, this is a really nice graphical interface for SFTP. There aren't tons of SFTP graphical interfaces out there, but this is one that's available for free, which is really generous of the company that's creating Termius. Now, we also have the ability to do port forwarding here. So if we wanted to maybe run a service on a remote server and then access that service across an SSH secured connection, we can set up a remote port that we want to, or actually a local port rather, that we want to forward to the remote system. So we'll take a look at how to do that in a moment. But first, I want to actually show you the snippets feature here. We can create different snippets packages. So let's say that we wanted to run a bunch of Docker commands. We can categorize these into what are called packages. So we can create like a Docker package, and we could add a new snippet into this package. And in the snippet right over here, we could say maybe run nginx container or something and say Docker run, net host, just to map it to the host, and then say nginx. I'll do -- detach in there. I could add in another snippet and say, run MySQL container, and then say Docker run publish 3306 to 3306, detach env MySQL root password equals cbt123, and then MySQL latest. So we can basically pre-configure all these different commands that we want to run. Maybe something else that we want to do up here at the root would be like to install some packages. So maybe we could do, install PowerShell, and we could do a snap install PowerShell -- classic. This is the command that you can use to install PowerShell on Ubuntu Linux. Now that we've got this little library of snippets, we can now use those on the remote systems. So if I come over to hosts here, I can just establish a connection to this host, and I already plugged in the password into the host configuration, so it's not going to prompt me for that. So now I've got a shell right here on my remote Linode system. And now I can start using these snippets over here that are right behind my head, and I can start to use these to actually run different commands. So typically when I spin up a new Ubuntu server, one of the first things that I like to do is to just install PowerShell onto it, because I like to use PowerShell on Linux. So I can just click that little run command right there, and that will go ahead and launch it. Now, if I want to, I can also establish other connections to other hosts. So I could come up here and double click the same host again, or a different host if I had a second host running. And now I've got two different connections right over here. And then if I want to, I can also click on one of these panes here, and then I can drag one of these panes either to the left or the bottom here. And I can actually have multiple sessions running in parallel here. And I can set the text size independently on each one. And then right down here at the bottom, you'll see this kind of dim text that says send commands to all panes. That is, again, a paid feature. That's the automation feature, as they call it. But that's a really powerful feature that would allow me to actually manage multiple hosts by syncing my keyboard input to all of those nodes at the same time. So really powerful feature. You can also do a more advanced pane management. So if you have more than two, I could drag this up to one of the corners like that, or I could do additional horizontal splits if I wanted to. So it's just a really nice interface. It's got kind of this smart snapping that allows me to just kind of move different panes around very easily and just kind of customize my view here. So I really like that pane management capability here. We also have this history, so we can see a history of our connections here. So if I exit one of those, you can see the historical connection that I made here, the date and time, was it successful, and things like that. But now that we've got a shell up and running here, let's go ahead and focus on one of these shells. And we're going to run a couple of Docker snippets here. So let's run the Nginx container. Of course, I don't have Docker installed. So if I do an apt update and apt install docker.io, that's another command that I very often use on my remote Linux systems here, just to get the Docker daemon installed so I can run various software applications without having to install them on the host. Docker is freaking awesome, and if you don't use it, you definitely should be. And I've got a lot of training at CBT Nuggets that talks about Docker and Kubernetes and all that kind of stuff, so feel free to check that out. Once we've got Docker installed, then we should be able to run these commands. So just give that a second to finish. In the meantime, you can also launch local terminals as well. By default, they do use CMD, which I actually thought was kind of weird, but I did submit some feedback to them to recommend that they actually look for the PowerShell core PWSH binary if you are on a Windows system and have PowerShell core installed, because pretty much everybody these days should be using PowerShell core edition. So there's our local terminal, and I'm surprised Docker's taken this long to install, but it's probably because I only have a single virtual CPU on this remote system. All right, looks like we are good to go here. Come on, there you go. All right, so, whoops, I don't want that. But what we're going to do now is choose this snippet to run an Nginx container. So as you can see, just as easy as that, we are launching a Docker container with Nginx. It just has to download the container image. Super easy to use, but because we created that snippet, it's just built in, ready to go. And if I wanted to run that across multiple nodes, I could just, double click that on each session that I wanted to run it in. So let's run a MySQL container. So I'll run that snippet as well. Very similarly, you can see it just runs very simply here. One other thing I wanted to point out as well is that in the host configuration here, we do have the ability to set custom themes here as well. Or actually, I shouldn't say custom themes, but these are just some built-in themes. So if I wanted to use something like maybe Nord Dark, for example, the existing shell doesn't get updated, but any new shells that you create definitely are going to use that latest configuration. So as you can see, even though I'm connecting to the same host, I am now using a different theme right here. So there are some different theme options depending on what your preference is. Also, if we go into the kind of global settings up here, you can do things like set your default terminal theme right up here as well. If you don't want to customize it on a per session basis, you can customize your known host keys right over here. That's the one host that I just connected to. There's also keyboard shortcuts right in here. You can also import your SSH private keys right into here so that you can select those in your host sessions. So if I wanted to connect with an SSH key instead, I could say set key and choose that SSH key right here. We also have the ability to log into our account that would allow you to synchronize your Termius sessions. And then, yeah, there's just some other options here, like if you want to, select text to copy and then right-click to paste. That's kind of a common config, or you can just use Control-Shift-C and Control-Shift-V to do copy and paste as well. So that's pretty much everything here. But let's go back to our host here, and it looks like we've got Nginx and MySQL up and running. Let's just do a Docker PS to double check. Yep, both of those are up and running. So this one's connected to the network, the host network rather. This one is connected to, it has a port forward on it for 3306. So this is where the port forwarding comes into play. So let's say that we wanted to access the remote host, but we wanted to access MySQL. Well, we could access it directly across the internet if we wanted to, because technically by default, the Linode cloud platform does not implement any kind of firewalling. So technically we could connect to this IP address on port 3306 and that would work. But if we wanted to forward our network traffic over to the remote server through an SSH connection, we can simply run through this port forwarding wizard and configure this. So we just need to choose a local port that we want to connect to. Let's just choose something random like 13677. Choose our bind address. We'll just leave that at all network interfaces. Then we'll select our host here. So we're going to connect through this host. Our destination address will just be the local system on port 3306. So now that is going to set up a rule so that we can connect to our local system on port 13677, and that will route the network traffic through to the remote server. Now, once this turns green, it should be connected here. Let me try that one more time because it looked like an error popped up right there. Not entirely sure why that's happening, but it looks like it is connected here. So let's go ahead and try to use the MySQL CLI to connect to that remote system. We'll say MySQL, and we'll say --host equals, and then we're going to paste in our IP address here. Or actually, no, not that. We're going to say host equals localhost, and then port equals, what did we say, 13677, I think. And then we'll say user equals root, and that should allow us to connect to the remote system. We'll do --password here as well, cbt123 as our password, and that should allow us to connect to that server. Awesome. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to set up your port forwarding rules that you can connect securely to remote services that may not have encryption enabled by default. It looks like we are using TLS here, so we actually have a TLS connection on top of SSH, which is kind of extra secure. But if you did have unencrypted services, like our Nginx service, for example, you could set up additional port forwarding rules as well. So if we wanted to, we could set up another port forwarding rule. So let's try setting up one for port 80. So we'll do a random local port like 16882, and we'll bind to all network interfaces. Let me copy that port number so I don't forget. We'll connect to the remote server on 127.0.0.1, and we'll connect on port 80. So now, rather than having unencrypted network traffic to Nginx, we can securely connect through our SSH proxy over to that IP address. So if I go to localhost 16882, that should give me my Nginx web server, but I'm connecting through it through the SSH connection rather than directly across the internet, as if I just copied the IP address of that host. Technically, I could do that, but that would technically be insecure. There you go, same thing. But in this case, I'm actually connecting across an unencrypted HTTP connection because the Nginx container image by default does not have any network level encryption applied to it. So that's a nice way to securely connect to your remote servers. Now, I think the last thing that I was going to cover at the moment was going to be the mobile application. So you can actually go out to the Google Play Store, you can install Termius onto your phone, and then you'll have the ability to create new sessions. So I could come out here and say, new host, for example. I could plug in the IP address of my virtual machine here. So let's say 139.144.36.207. And then we'll connect as username root. And then I think Trevor 123 exclamation point. I think that was it. And so let's go ahead and hit the check mark and then we'll establish a connection. So it says requesting the key fingerprint here. Whoops, sorry, I didn't have that open. So back here in my host configuration, let's go ahead and open that up. Say edit. We can set things like host name. We've got our username and our password right in there. We could also import an SSH key if we wanted to into our key store. And there's a bunch of other options in here that we don't need to worry about right now, but then we can go ahead and just click on that host and get connected. All right, so we'll confirm the host key and boom, now we are connected. So I know the text is probably on the pretty small side there. Let me see if there's a way to bump that up. Not totally sure how to do that, but what we'll do is just maybe zoom in a little bit here on my computer. I think I can do that. So let's try that and see if that helps. And then I'm just going to do something really simple, like just a docker ps command or something here. Let me open up my keyboard right down here, and we'll just run docker ps. And sure enough, there you can see my containers that are running on that remote host right here from my phone without having to hit my desktop computer. So pretty powerful stuff. They do support logging in to your Termius account as well. So if you have a Termius account and you want to log into that, you can do that. You also have SFTP here as well. So we could open up our SFTP client right here from my phone. I can see these are the files that I had created before. So I could edit the file, use VI to edit the file if I wanted to. So I've got this nice tabbed interface right up here. I can close different tabs. I can open up my code snippets right here as well. So I could add in a new snippet here and then say maybe, docker run nginx or something like that. I don't know. Just run nginx container. I could set up some Kubernetes stuff. I know I misspelled that. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to kind of breeze through this though. So we'll open up our shell here and then go to our snippets right here, choose that snippet, and boom, we just ran another Docker container right here from our phone. So pretty powerful stuff. I like the fact that they do have a desktop client that I believe is cross-platform. I don't think I've actually installed it on macOS yet, but it works great on the Windows platform, works great on the Android platform here as well. I'm just really overall impressed with how smooth their software is. The design is really nice. The interface is just really simple to navigate here. You know, we've got the ability to set dark themes. We've got some global settings here like fonts and colors that we can choose. We can choose our default color scheme here if we want something like a Monokai theme or maybe a Nord Dark theme on the mobile app here. We can choose a few different popular fonts like Ubuntu Mono or Source Code Pro or JetBrains Mono. Some nice fonts in here. I like Source Code Pro a lot though, so I'm glad that they chose that as their default. But yeah, it's just a really cool application. We got port forwarding rules right here as well. We could set up new port forwarding rules right through that same wizard interface. And you know, sometimes I forget local and remote port forwarding, so it's really nice that they have that little animation to kind of remind you just what type of connection you're making. Just makes things very, very user-friendly. Anyways, I'm just going to end the video there because I've been talking quite a while here, but I would encourage you guys to check out Termius either on your desktop host operating system or on your Android device. It's a really sweet application, and I think they did a really great job with it, and I hope to see how it expands in the future. The free tier honestly provides a lot of nice functionality. I'm pretty happy with this free tier here. It's just a really beautiful application, just very user-friendly and enjoyable to use, so feel free to check it out. Once again, just as a final reminder, you can support my work over at CBT Nuggets, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment below with any additional thoughts, maybe some other software packages that you are familiar with that you think are valuable, SFTP GUI applications or other terminal interfaces like Tabby. I'm a huge fan of Tabby as well. I might do a video on that at some point because that is open source, which is really nice, and it's cross-platform. It's a little bit buggy sometimes with the rendering, but overall it's a pretty beautiful application as well. But yeah, check out Termius. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.